So, I finally watched Solo: A Star Wars Story, and I thought it was okay. It's not the worst Star Wars movie out there, but it's not the best either. I thought it was a perfectly enjoyable time that unfortunately fell flat in quite a few places. I definitely don't think it's as bad as some reviews made it out to be, because there were some reviews that were released when the movie initially came out that stated, "This is the worst thing to ever happen to the character in the history of Star Wars." And I just have to disagree, because that's just not true. Because this exists. This is the first Star Wars movie that I've come out of that I've just felt middle of the road about. For everything that works in this movie, there's just a few things around the corner that kind of, not ruin the experience per se, but just kind of let down what was enjoyable a few minutes ago. It's definitely not one of the worst movies of the year, that's for sure, because I can tell you now that The Cloverfield Paradox, Mute, and The Predator are still miles worse than this movie. At least this movie actually has some somewhat enjoyable moments and has a fairly cohesive story throughout, whereas those movies are just messes. Probably the best aspect of the movie, for me, was the acting. Not everyone was great, but the people who were good really did stand out in their scenes. Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian is perfect casting. This guy has had an incredible year, and he pretty much nails the character of Lando down to a T. Everything from the voice down to little mannerisms that Billy D. Williams had in the original trilogy. He just is that character, and I thought he did a fantastic job playing him and really brought a lot of the humour to the movie that was much needed, because I just felt this movie was lacking something in the humour department. I'll get onto that more specifically in a minute, but luckily Donald Glover's character managed to supply what was some of the best laughs in the movie. I thought Alden Ehrenreich was okay as Han Solo. Unfortunately, at this point, Harrison Ford is so synonymous with the character of Han Solo that you can't really see anyone else playing that character except for him. So when someone like Alden Ehrenreich steps in and plays said character, it just looks like they're doing a bit of an imitation of him. But I thought for what they had to go with, I thought he was okay. There's also other people in the movie like Woody Harrelson, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Emilia Clarke, Thandie Newton's in the movie for a bit as well. I thought they were all okay. No one's particularly bad in the movie, they're just there, which is kind of annoying, but the two standouts, well, the two that really showcased what they could do the best, being Alden Ehrenreich and Donald Glover, those were easily the ones that kept me watching throughout the movie, whereas everyone else just felt okay, I guess. There were also a few ideas presented in the movie that I thought were pretty cool while they lasted, and seeing specific characters that we've grown to love over the years gradually become friends over the course of the movie, like for example Han and Chewbacca, I thought was really nice to see, because that was probably one of the better aspects of the movie, seeing their friendship blossom over the course of the film. And it's just small little things like that that they didn't exactly nail in this movie, but they probably did as best as they could have done. However, like I said at the start, this movie isn't perfect, and there's quite a few things that hold it back from being as good as it possibly could have been. The first one being that it's really dark, and I don't mean that in the sense that, ooh, it's moody and, atmospheric and depressing, stuff like that. I mean, it's literally dark. It's so darkly lit, especially in the first half of the movie, that you can't really tell what's going on. It's really hard to tell what you're actually looking at. And that even kind of plays into this scene that takes up about the middle section of the movie, where they're trying to escape this place in the Millennium Falcon. It's just so darkly lit, you can't tell what the fuck is going on. And I honestly don't know whose idea that was. They could have just shoved in a few lights here and there to brighten it up. It's just kind of confusing. There were some pretty good action scenes in this movie, but unfortunately a lot of them don't quite know how to end and just kind of outstay their welcome. For example, there's a few nearer the start of the movie that just happen and then they just keep going, and then it's like they don't quite know how to wrap it up in the neatest way possible. And that happens a couple of times in the movie where you have these pretty okay action sequences, but they just keep dragging on and on and on, and by the time they do end, you're then immediately into another action set piece that then does the exact same thing. And that leads into another thing that I didn't quite I didn't think it was quite well executed in the movie, and that's the jokes. Though none of the jokes are bad, it's just the quips and one-liners just kind of fell flat in execution and didn't quite pack the punch I think they were expecting them to have. And I think this is mostly down to the whole director change that happened halfway through the movie being filmed. I'll get onto more of that in a second, but if you remember rightly, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who directed the Lego Movie and the 21-22 Jump Street films, were originally directing this movie, and they chose a cast that are fairly renowned for doing comedies. You got Donald Glover, who is part comedian, who's on Community. Woody Harrelson's good at improv. You've got Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who was in this fantastic BBC comedy called Fleabag. They had specifically chosen actors that are good with improvisation and comedy. Then Ron Howard comes in and makes it more of a drama-focused movie, and I think the humour kind of gets lost in translation a little bit there. Which is a bit of a shame, because like I said, even though the jokes and quips and stuff like that aren't bad in the movie, they're just not executed very well. Also, the origins of specific things relating to Han Solo, the character, are kind of lazy and stupid. I think the best one, best example anyway, I won't give it away exactly what happens, but the origin of how he actually gets his name of Han Solo is one of the laziest things I've seen all year. It's really stupid, and it's a very small moment, but it's one of those moments where you just go, really? Fine. Now, like I said at the start, this movie got quite a few negative reviews, or at least more negative than I was kind of expecting it to get, especially now after watching it. There were some people out there that feel the same way as me, where it was just a perfectly enjoyable movie that you're probably going to forget as soon as you've left the cinema. But it was like a good 50-50 split of people that enjoyed it for what it was, and then people who really didn't like it. And unfortunately, this all culminated in Solo being the lowest performing Star Wars movie at the box office ever. And I think the negative reception and overall bad reception at the box office as well is down to a couple of things. And these are just my personal opinion. I could be completely wrong, but this is just what I took away from the whole reception and how it was received aspect of the movie. First of all, you've got the whole reshoot thing that happened halfway through filming. Lord and Miller had pretty much filmed almost the entire movie, I think. Then Disney fired them because they didn't like what they were doing, and then Ron Howard comes in, who's not particularly well known for doing comedy, and he just comes in and then gives it his own twist, and that's what we got in the final film. And I think that could have been a reason for why it didn't do well at the box office. It's probably not 100% the reason why, but that's probably just one thing that came to mind, because Lord and Miller have gained a reputation in recent years for being two of the best filmmakers out there for making comedy movies. For example, the Lego Movie was a huge hit. 21, 22 Jump Street, huge hit. They are pretty much unstoppable when it comes to comedy, and the fact that they were going to make this movie a little bit like a Guardians of the Galaxy themed kind of thing, with banter back and forth from all the characters, I would have loved to have seen that. And I think a lot of people were excited to see what they would bring to Star Wars. But unfortunately, the fact that they then got outed halfway through the process, and you bring in Ron Howard, who, in my personal opinion, hasn't made a decent movie in quite a long time, probably since Rush, and that was back in 2013, which was still quite a while ago. All that hype just suddenly kind of drips down a bit, which I think may have had... It's definitely a reason as to why I was hesitant with the movie in the first place. But yeah, I think that might be a small factor into why it didn't perform well at the box office. You have two directors that know what they're doing and, you know, have a reason for people to be excited, and then you bring along a director who hasn't really made a decent film in quite a while, and then, you know, the hype starts to die down. However, the other aspect that I think affected the overall reception and bad box office numbers for Solo, and I think is one of the main reasons as to why this happened, is because it was released too soon. You had The Last Jedi, which came out in December of 2017, and then roughly 3 or 4, 5 months later, you have Solo coming out. Whereas the last couple of years, you've had almost a whole year to digest the previous Star Wars film to then go into the next one. For example, Force Awakens comes out in December of 2015, and then by December 2016, you have Rogue One. And that's pretty much almost a year gap for you to digest the last film, for you then to go in fresh for the new one. But for some reason they decided to release Solo in the summertime, which only gives you a span of like a couple of months to really digest what happens with The Last Jedi. And we all know what the reception was for The Last Jedi. Again, a very diversive 50-50 split between audiences. Some people, like myself, thoroughly enjoyed it. The other half, though, were, and this is unfortunately the minority that is the loudest, absolutely hated the movie. And I think it's this aspect alone that affected both the bad reception that the movie got and its bad box office numbers. I think because there was such a short time span between both movies coming out, and because quite a few people were pissed off with The Last Jedi so much, I think they were still caught up in that whole Last Jedi hatred, that by the time Solo comes out, they needed something else to kind of vent their frustration out on. And because Solo was released so close to The Last Jedi, that was probably the easiest target for them to release their anger out on. If they had waited and released it in December, like they had done the last couple of years, then maybe the reception and box office numbers would have been a little bit better. But by releasing it so close to a movie that was divisive anyway, I think you're going to get the ripple effect of that other movie, and then it just kind of had a backlash effect on Solo, thus meaning that it ended up becoming the worst performing Star Wars movie at the box office. Again, this is just my opinion, but I definitely think that is one of the key, if not the key aspect as to why it didn't perform as well as everyone thought it would. But yeah, in the end, I thought Solo was a fun movie that wasn't perfect. I wasn't expecting it to be perfect, in all fairness, but, you know, you have to work with what you're given, I suppose. If I had to rate this movie, I'd probably give it something like a 6.5 out of 10. But with this video, I didn't particularly want to do a normal review per se. I just kind of wanted to do a more laid back discussion and open expression of my opinions of the movie, rather than just, you know, this is good, this is the bad, here's my rating, like my normal reviews. I just wanted it to be a bit more laid back and me just openly mouthing off my opinions on the movie in a bit more of a looser fashion. So guys, those were my thoughts on Solo, a Star Wars story. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want me to do more of these types of videos, as well as doing my normal reviews, then please let me know. I just thought I'd do it for this movie because I missed it in the cinema, and I just thought it'd be the right thing to do for this kind of film. But yeah, if you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Bye!